All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started for today. All right, so welcome to today's webinar. We have a great topic to talk about today. We're going to talk about teen dating violence. I know this is definitely something that y'all have thought about, that y'all have reached out to me to cover. Something that we're dealing with every day, and maybe we don't really understand some of the nuances and what's going on. So we are funded by the Office of Violence Against Women. I want to give a little shout out there. And let's do a little bit of some housekeeping here. So this webinar is interactive. Yes, I am a millennial Scorpio. I do love to hear the sound of my own voice, but I also would like to interact with other people. So I would love for y'all to chime in, with questions, comments, stuff like that. So let's go over what your screen should look like. So it should look kind of like this. So we're going to use 3 different features today. We have this Q&A button, so you can send me a question at any time, and I will answer it live, and I will be monitoring that throughout the webinar. And you can actually send that anonymously. So if you just want to send me a question, but you don't want to know who, don't want me to know who it came from, totally okay. And you can do that in that dialog box. Also, if anyone does ask a question, I will not say your name. Even if you type it into chat, your name will not be shared. So next, we have the raise hand button, which some of you have already used, which I really appreciate it. So basically, if I ask a question like, how many of you love tea? And you're like, heck yeah, I love me some green tea. And you can raise your hand for that. Next is the chat button, so the chat feature. So this is the one that generally gets used the most. Some of you have already popped into the chat feature a little bit earlier. So if everyone could click that chat button, let's try this out. And you can change who your messages are sent to. So you can have it sent to panelists, which would just be me, or you can have it sent to all panelists and all attendees. So why don't you go ahead and type into chat who you are, where you're from. Are you, what do you do? Are you a system advocate? Are you, I was like, what are the other things? We oftentimes get a lot of mental health professionals, community-based advocates on webinars. Oh gosh, I got a bunch that just popped in. Let's see what we got here. All right. Oh, great. We have a couple SANE folks here, sexual assault nurse examiners and some coordinators, sexual assault advocates, nice. Folks from Juvenile Justice Center, ooh, art therapists, nice, nice, nice. Some youth advocates, social workers, DCFS folks, love to see DCFS folks, a bunch of sexual assault advocates, some more LCSWs. Oh, we got some folks from out of state. Looks like we got some new folks. I think this is the first time we've had folks from Washington. Welcome, welcome. Excellent. That's really cool. We have a lot of great folks here. I'm glad that everyone was able to attend. All right, so yes, friends. I know that you're here for the information, and I also know that you're here for the CEUs, okay? I know what I am, and I know what I'm not, okay? And I'm an excellent source of free CEUs. So yes, there will be a link sent after the webinar, and you can fill out this little quiz. You just have to get at least 70% on it, and then I will send you a little CEU certificate. All right, so let's talk about teen dating violence. If you have any questions, make sure to type those into chat. I will be watching that. Okay, and these are our learning objectives. So we are going to identify teen dating violence. We're going to talk about it. What is teen dating violence? What isn't teen dating violence? We're going to look at national and local, numbers, information, and we are based in Utah, so we do have some Utah-specific information, and a lot of it can be generalized, and there also is some information and some studies and surveys that we have within Utah that generally other states use, like the Youth Risky Behavior Survey and stuff like that. So for those who are out of state, you absolutely can find state-specific information as well. We're gonna, look at the viewpoints of adults and teenagers, right? We're gonna talk about maybe the things that us as adults or us as service providers may have said or done that might have minimized some of the feelings and experiences and invalidated teens and young folks who have experienced violence, right? We're going to talk about technology, y'all. I do have a presentation specifically on technology use and abuse. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And of course, we're going to go over resources. There's a bunch of resources that are available as well. Let me see here. There should be a little intro slide for us. Let's see where that went. All right, well, looks like we're starting off with just a little bit of a hiccup here. Let's see. All right, let's get this popped up here. Hopefully we can get this one. There we go. All right, let's try this. Okay, so let's see. Make sure my screen is still shared. All right, let's see. Can y'all see the presentation? There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. So the Utah Domestic Violence Coalition, we are basically, we're the state domestic violence coalition for the state of Utah. So we are the federally recognized coalition for Utah. So all states and territories have domestic violence coalitions and sexual violence coalitions. Some states and territories have them combined, so like a dual coalition, and some have separate. So Utah, we just happen to have a separate coalition. I think Washington, I think y'all's is a dual coalition. Yeah, Washington has a really great coalition, a lot of really great information on the website. But basically, we support folks who do direct services through education, training, and technical assistance. So technical assistance on a coalition level isn't you calling in and saying, "Hey, Andy, can you help me connect my mouse to my laptop?" I mean, I could probably like low key do that, but we don't have any grants to cover that. But technical assistance on a coalition level is basically y'all reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, I'm working with someone and I'm unsure how to provide resources, or there's significant barriers and I'm unsure what to do." And so I link you with resources, other organizations that may be helpful or supportive, and national best practices. So that's a big thing that I do. So here is here's a little bit about me. And someone did ask in Q&A about if this is going to be recorded. It is, and it should be on YouTube by tomorrow. All right, so my name's Andy Tremonti, and I use they, them, their pronouns. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Coalition. And basically that means that I'm over all the education that the Coalition offers. So I facilitate our 40-hour core advocacy training, and that's for that's like the basic training for advocates and service providers throughout the state. And I do webinars and a whole bunch of community trainings. I really love to develop curriculum. So if there's something that you're like, heck, there's something going on here, we don't know much about this, could you train us on it? And my job is to do, research, find empirical studies and peer-reviewed, research and evidence-based stuff, and create the curriculum for you, right? The outreach part of my job is I specialize in Two-Spirit and LGBTQIA folks. So that's where the bulk of my technical assistance probably comes from, is folks asking questions and wanting support on working with queer and trans folks. So I am a Sasquatch enthusiast. So, I love me some sassy. Definitely keeps me on my toes, keeps that heart rate going when I go hiking. So this is a screenshot from the original Nintendo game Batman, and it's one of my favorite games. I've loved it since I was a kid, and this year is the year that I'll finally beat it. Here is my cat Toriko. He is like 16 pounds. He's big. He's a big boy. He's about 4.5 years old. Here's Jorge. He's 17. He's the one that you can hear kind of meowing in the background. And yeah, he's just living his best life right now. And I love Xena. So Xena Warrior Princess. That's what's keeping me whole in this hard time. Okay, so let's talk about teen dating violence. Okay, so in Utah, we don't have a teen dating violence statute, but the CDC does define teen dating violence very similarly to intimate partner violence. So how about y'all in chat? How about you tell me, what does teen dating violence look like? What does it sound like? What are some of the symptoms and signs of teen dating violence? So type that into chat. What does it look like? I mean, on screen we have physical violence, psychological, emotional, sexual violence, stalking. Those are categories, but what, specifically does it look like? All right, we got a bunch of stuff coming in. Okay, so sexual advances without consent. Yep. So any sexual interactions without consent. Absolutely. Oh, isolation. Yep. Telling their partner who to hang out with or who not to hang out with, and that they can or cannot participate in sports or activities. Yeah. Power and control, red flags such as extreme jealousy, threatening suicide if they leave the relationship. Yeah. Isolation, intimidation, degrading, calling names and being demeaning. Yeah. What about peer pressure, y'all? Is peer pressure part of teen dating violence? Right. Absolutely. And so that's one of the things that we will see differently from, adults who are experiencing intimate partner violence, right? Is we have this element of peer pressure during the teen years, right? From not only friends, other students, folks that they're going to school with, even potentially parents, right? So, I mean, we, just went over this, teen dating violence or dating violence is very similar to intimate partner violence, but it's between dating partners, right? And even adults can experience dating violence, right? If you're dating someone and violence is happening or abuse is happening, then you're experiencing that, right? We are going to go over this a little bit later, but this, we're going to go over the study specifically in a minute, but this third dot point down here, this one, this is hard. This is a difficult stat to look at. Is 81% of parents who were surveyed were either believe teen dating violence is not an issue or admit that they do not know if it's an issue. So think about that. Think about maybe some of the things that we believe or some of the things that we have said or done. Do we think or know if teen dating violence is an issue in our area, in our state, right? Spoiler alert, it is. It is. It's happening everywhere, right? Even if we don't see it, even if we don't notice it, okay? So let's talk about nationally. So, of course, I mean, we've seen this, demographic, this age group, experiencing, higher rates of other forms of violence, sexual violence, dating violence, intimate partner violence. But, females between the age of 16 and 24 are more likely to be victims of intimate partner violence, right? So that's a young demographic. That's a young age group, right? So these are folks that are going through identity development, who are starting to date people, who are forming relationships, and these are the folks who are experiencing these high rates of violence, right? So down here on the second dot point, almost more than 20% of female high school students and 13% of male high school students have reported being physically or sexually abused by a dating partner. And that is national, okay? So that's a lot. That's a lot of folks, right? And think about, especially when we do self-reporting surveys, that sometimes, we have those self-reporting survey errors where people won't answer honestly, or they will avoid certain questions, or they won't answer certain questions, right? So it would be really interesting to see if we knew everyone who is experiencing that, right? So really interesting. The top dot point here is the violent behavior is, again, starting, in those teenage years, the 12 to 18 ages. And the earlier that power and control behavior starts, the more intense it becomes later in life. So think about when folks are establishing these patterns of abuse during adolescence, that there's more and more years that these behaviors are becoming solidified, that these behaviors are becoming more than just habits, right? And so that's why it's so important to start anti-oppression and anti-violence work in our children, right? Is stopping it after it's started, stopping it after it's a huge problem is a lot more difficult than preventing it, right? And so that means having conversations with kids, talking about safer sex, talking about what does a healthy relationship look like, and what does an unhealthy relationship look like, or an abusive relationship look like, and what are resources for those things, right? Okay. So now we're going to talk about the Youth Risky Behavior Survey. So this one is specific for Utah, because I'm from Utah. But these are the numbers from the 2017 study. So basically, this asks folks, in the last 12 months, have you, and it lists a whole bunch of different questions. So this is grades 9 through 12, okay? So, the second dot point down, more than a fourth of students were verbally or emotionally harmed by someone they were dating, okay? And that's in the last 12 months within Utah. And then, 1 out of 11 students were forced by someone that they were dating to do sexual things that they didn't want to do. So 1 in 11. And we're going to actually go over some of these things here in just a second. And so it's really interesting, especially with the sexual questions, with some of the barriers and stigma on talking about that in Utah. I would say that those numbers are probably higher, right? And this slide is really interesting. It's really wild. So again, from the 2017 Youth Risky Behavior Survey, 11% of students experienced rape in their lifetime. So these are ninth graders to 12th graders who have experienced rape in their lifetime. Okay, so generally folks who are 18 or under, right? And then the last dot point, so 3.3% of students have ever used physical force to rape someone. So they had a question on there that asked if have you used physical force to rape someone? And 3.3% of students admitted that. 3.3% of students said yes. So this is very, very interesting, right? That 3.3% of students is really, really small, is a very small number. However, I wonder what the actual number would be if we knew truly how many folks have done that. But 3.3% of students admitted to that, right? So here's kind of an example of what the survey looked like and kind of the questions that they asked. So experience sexual violence by someone, being forced to do sexual things, kissing, touching, being forced to have sexual intercourse. So if you notice that they use very, scientific words or very, health kind of, terminology, right? But we're missing some of the language, some of this colloquial speech that kids are using, that this common slang terms, right? So, for example, in Utah, here are 4 words, and if you know any other words that also mean the same thing, please type them in chat. These are the 4 that I have heard. So all of these 4 things mean roughly the same thing. It's basically when, 2 folks who are engaging in, they don't characterize it as sex or sexual behavior or doing sexual things. Basically, it's when a penis is inserted into vagina and you just hang out there, right? So you just soak, you dock, you float, you marinate, right? So now all those words make sense, right? And so for many folks, that isn't considered sex. They don't consider that sex. We're not having sex. There's no ejaculation. There's no thrusting. We're just kind of hanging out, right? How many of us would consider that sex? You can raise your hand. You can type yes into the thing. Oh, yeah. Whole bunch of hands just went up, right? So absolutely, that is sex, right? So that's, there's, penetration that's there, sexual excitement, all these different things that go into, sexual activity and sexual intercourse. And so think about if folks don't define these activities as sexual activities or these activities as sex, those are getting missed on some of these surveys, right? It's not sex. I haven't had sex. I mean, I've floated and, we're soaking, but it's not really sex, right? And think about even some of us as parents or caregivers or mentors, is maybe we've heard kids, say that, like, oh, they're just soaking, it's not a big deal or whatever, right? And we're like, oh, what does that mean? Like, did you spill your Mountain Dew on yourself, right? But that's not what they're talking about, right? So, it's really important too that we're not lashing out at folks who, may be doing some of these behaviors or experimenting and stuff like that. Remember to meet folks with, support, open and honest conversations rather than punishing conversations, right? Because we want folks to be able to talk to us and feel safe and comfortable talking to caregivers. We don't want them to feel like they will be punished for experiencing things that many teens are experiencing. So here's some information, some crime data from the state of Utah. So here are some numbers and information and graphs on rape. So on the left-hand side, the blue bars are 2017, the gray bars are 2018, but these are reported rapes within the state. So, it seems it doesn't fluctuate too much. The reported rapes are lower in February, March, and April. And so that's kind of interesting to see, right? And this top middle graph, age of arrestees for rape offenses. So the age group that is arrested the most for rape offenses is 15 to 19. So the light blue is female and then the dark blue is male. So even with female offenders, that we do see an increase in that age category. So really, really interesting, right? That the majority of folks who are being arrested for rape are from 15 to 19. Okay. So the SHARP survey data, if any of you have heard of the SHARP survey. So this is a similar survey that's done every 2 years. And so I believe it's 10th and 12th graders. And so it asks a number of different questions. Oh, so right here, it also includes 6th and 8th graders. So it asks a number of questions, and the last survey that was administered, they did finally include sexual orientation on there, right? It's important to have that demographic information, right? Without information, without studies and numbers, it does make it difficult to create programming and effective services for folks within the community. And so I'm glad that was added. So let's go into this. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the SHARP survey here in a sec as well. But this is from the Utah State Board of Education. So this is their incident reporting, right? So this is from 2018. And so if you notice all of the different incidents that were reported to schools, right, to the state board, we have 0.02 were sexual assaults, and then the highest category would be fighting, right? Mutual altercation at 7.5%. So, I mean, we know that sexual violence, sexual assault, rape is underreported, and the majority of those assaults do not get reported, right? And it's actually really interesting if you kind of look here in the middle too, that we have harassment, sexual harassment is at 2%, and then non-sexual harassment is 2.2%. So it's really interesting to see, what are some of the barriers for students to reporting that, right? Do they feel that they will be punished for reporting that? Well, why were you engaged in this? Why did you do this? Are they being victim blamed, right? Are they worried that if they report, that they will be reported themselves to the honor, for violating the honor code, right? For not adhering to standards of the school, even though they were victim of the sexual violence, right? And so what are some of these barriers that students are facing to reporting violence that they're experiencing, intimate partner violence, dating violence, sexual violence, right? So, I mean, dating violence, we know it exists, right? Even if we may not, fully acknowledge it, we know that it exists. But how are we responding to that, right? How are we preventing that? How are we educating around teen dating violence, right? Around intimate partner violence for young folks. So think about how we speak to folks when they talk about dating issues that they're having, right? Think about maybe a child or a kid, they come and talk to you and say, hey, I've been dating this person for, 3 weeks, and they get really upset when I don't text them, throughout the day, and I'm in class and I can't, text while I'm in class or I'll get in trouble, but they get so mad and I don't know what to do. And, maybe the parents or someone says, oh, you're a kid, you just got to go through some of the bad to get to the good, it's not even a big deal, right? It's like, oh, actually that person just confided in you that they're experiencing dating violence, that they're experiencing power and control, and they don't know what to do about it, and they went to you to ask for help, and you invalidated them, right? It's not just a phase. It's not just something that they have to go through, right? Us as adults, us as mentors, us as service providers, that we are in this very unique role that we can offer that support, we can offer that education, and we can assist those youth through these really difficult relationships. So think about the difference between um, someone kind of just figuring it out, right? Well, are they going to figure out that these are unhealthy relationships and how to avoid them in the future, or understand or be able to identify red flags or warning signs, right? Or maybe they think, oh, well, I guess this just is dating, and if they keep on texting me and want to hang out with me so much, it's because they just really love me, right? When hey, those are those are some pretty big signs of power and control and abuse and unhealthy relationships. So how can we as adults intervene and provide that support and provide that advocacy and that care, right? And think about how teens literally have less control over their lives. They have to be up at a certain time to go to school. They have to be in bed at a certain time to get the 72 hours of sleep that teenagers need to um, you know um, be rested and be able to perform the next day. And think about these dating relationships is something that they have more control over, right? And so how can we help guide and support folks when they are in these relationships, when they are in these connections with other people that they don't have any experience with, right? So here's a couple examples of where teens, folks are learning about relationships, what ideal relationships look like, stuff like that, right? um, these are some big ones that people generally talk about. But think about, if we are not teaching kids, if we are not being examples of, then where are folks learning it, right? Think about how much of our media romanticizes stalking. It normalizes stalking, right? Stalking is sexy. Okay. Someone who loves me so much that they can't stay away from me. Gosh, that feels so good, right? That's power and control. That's stalking, right? That's intimate partner violence. That's dating violence, right? Think about even the way that we talk about technology and the conversations we have about technology with our kids, right? Um, so we're going to talk a little bit more about the tech stuff. I want you to really think about it for the next chunk of time. Like, how are we talking to our kids about tech? How are we talking to our kids about relationships, right? Because I want to get back to that. So one of the issues with teen dating violence and dating violence is there are significantly less resources. There are many organizations, depending on your state, and depending on your confidentiality standards and your laws and policies, that may not be able to provide resources for minors. Okay, so not only not being able to provide resources, but if they do have resources for folks who are under 18, then they may have to get parents' permission, right? They may have to get guardians' permission, caregivers' permission. And that can be a problem. That can be really difficult. Is if something happened to a child and they don't feel safe, or maybe the parent or a family member is someone who has perpetrated some of that violence, that what resources do they have, right? If maybe guardian or caregiver, finds out that they have been dating someone and that there was sexual violence, that parent or guardian, caretaker may lash out at that child, right? And so think of all these different barriers that children face and that youth face, that it's scary enough to be dating and putting yourself on the line. And then, on top of it, violence that is happening in that relationship, and fear that parents, guardians, or caregivers may react in a punitive way rather than a supportive way. So there are a number of different laws that do complicate this further. So depending on what type of violence that folks have faced, they, may be able to consent without parent, guardian, or caregiver's consent to like a SANE exam, a sexual assault nurse exam, right? Um, However, depending on your state, those laws may be different. So it's hard enough for us as service providers to keep track of all these laws. Think about how difficult it is for a youth, right? So here's the teen power and control wheel. So this is just like many of the other power control wheels that you see. This is a visual representation of how folks gain power and control over others. But if you notice on this one, we have things like isolation and exclusion, right? Peer pressure, using social status, right? So, treating them like a servant, and it looks like this is a gendered wheel. Treating them like a servant, making all decisions. If you've seen, what's the show? So like, for example, I've recently watched like Teenage Bounty Hunters, right? It's on one of the streaming services. But in this show, there is a character who treats her friends like servants and bosses them around and controls them and lashes out at them socially when they don't fall into order, right? And so that right there is a perfect example, right? Intimidating folks, even making threats, sharing someone's secrets, right? Those are huge things. Using like Facebook, social media to share people's secrets, or to start rumors. Rumors do a lot of damage, right? And I mean, even if any of us have experienced that, professionally like that, it's difficult to counter those, and especially as a youth, when we may not have as many tools or skills at our what is it, that are available to us. I was like, how do I word this? Yeah, and then someone said in chat that not enough education is out there. Absolutely. Like social emotional learning, that's something that isn't focused on in schools, right? So it's really interesting, think about the curriculum that's in schools, math, English, language, all these different things, like absolutely, important in many ways. And yes, I use math almost every day. Even working in social services, I use math almost every day. But think of all these, things that we're learning in school, and how much of our learning is focused on social emotional learning. How much of our learning is focused on creating and maintaining healthy relationships, right? And so we get to this, teen equality wheel, right? So this is basically what healthy relationships look like, right? It's interesting too, because when I, do this presentation, I ask, what does a healthy relationship look like? Many times, even from adults, not just teens, but folks will, the first thing that they say is, my partner does not hit me, right? And absolutely, that's a part of a healthy, relationship. However, there's more to a healthy relationship than not experiencing abuse, right? So think about trust and support, shared power, communication, right? So this one on the bottom right, honesty and accountability. So this one can be tricky, right? So think about how honesty is oftentimes used to abuse or control folks. So here's an example. Here's an example of honesty. If, say, your partner is trying a new recipe and they're like, hey, honey, will you give me your honest opinion on this? I don't know if I like the spices. Tell me what could be improved, or tell me the things that you don't like. What do you think about this, right? And so, you eat the food or whatever, and you say, I really, I like the overall flavor. I would actually really like it if it was a little bit more spicy. Is there any chili powder in this or whatever? And like that right there is honesty, right? Honesty is not a partner walking up to you or having a conversation with you and saying, you need to give me your social media passwords because I need to make sure that you are being honest with me. I need to make sure that you are not cheating on me and that you're not talking to other people. So handing over your passwords, that's not being honest. That's not honesty. That's you, um, someone gaining power and control over you, right? Someone leveraging that fear or this idea of not wanting to be dishonest, right? You are a independent, autonomous being, and you have the right to privacy, and you do not have to share your passwords with anyone, right? So, think about that in adult relationships, and then think about that in teen relationships or youth relationships, right? And think about, maybe us as parents, caregivers, guardians. Is there any times that we said, hey, child, hey, offspring, um, I need to have access to your accounts. I need to have access to your phones. I need to look. I pay for it. And I need to make sure, I need to know what you're doing. Does that sound similar to maybe something that they would experience in a abusive or unhealthy relationship? So think about even the things that we say as caregivers and as parents, that these may set our kids up for failure. These may set our kids up to see and equate love with monitoring, love with sharing everything, right? And sharing everything isn't, a part of love and relationships. Um, Being an independent, autonomous being is definitely part of that, right? And so remember that we're separate beings and we overlap and come together for a relationship. So think about these conversations we can have with kids and youth about more safely using their phone, more safely using social media, and having these open and honest, validating conversations with our kids, so our kids feel safe, they feel comfortable talking to us when things happen, right? Rather than hiding it because they don't want to get in trouble, right? So just think about that, right? Our jobs as parents and caregivers and guardians is to give youth and kids these skills so that they can grow up and make informed decisions, right? We can't be there every time it's just not possible. And so we need to set our kids up for success, right? So okay, is this the one we talked about? No. Okay. So here's, some things that we've kind of already talked about, but we'll talk about the top one. 80% of teens regard verbal abuse as a serious issue for their age group. So 80%. And remember that other number that we saw at the beginning, that 81% of parents didn't know or didn't think that teen dating violence was an issue, right? So if we go down to this third dot point down, 71% say that they know the warning signs of an abusive relationship. So this is really interesting, right? And so if youth know the warning signs of an abusive relationship, and maybe they're in these relationships, these maybe cycles or relationships are continuing. Maybe they don't know how to get out of those relationships. Maybe they don't know how to safely get out of those relationships or how to find support, right? And so this is really good information to know, because how can we as adults, how can we as caregivers, how can we as mentors, how can we help bridge that gap and support those youth through these things, right? And so, yeah, parents' viewpoints on teen dating violence. So again, the 81% of parents believe teen dating violence is not an issue, or they admit that they don't know it's an issue, right? And so if you're one of those 81%, I'm glad that you're here. And, maybe it's time to start having those conversations with our kids and with youth and, as mentors. So we have a couple different graphs here. So the one on the left, this was a questionnaire by Teenage Research Unlimited from 2005. And they asked, if you were ever in an abusive relationship, who would you talk to about it? And so the majority of people said friends, right? We're not surprised about that. And then of course it goes to mom and then siblings and And it's really interesting because the third one from the bottom is minister, priest, rabbi, or someone else within my faith. And I think in Utah that would be probably a little bit higher, right? Okay, so on the right-hand side, we have the Sharps survey data. And so this question was asking, in the last 30 days, who did you talk to about feeling sad, hopeless, or suicidal? So with this one, the majority of folks talked to a parent, right? So the majority of folks talked to a parent it looks like for 6th graders, for 8th graders, it was a friend or a peer. And then the older they get, the more likely they are to talk to a peer. So that's really interesting, right? So it kind of mirrors that study from 2005. And so, think about when youth are becoming more independent and they're kind of separating a little bit from family. Who are they talking to about some of the things that they're going through, right? And are the people that they're talking to equally as unknowledgeable about risks, about healthy relationships, about abuse, right? So I'm sure it comes as no surprise, but violent relationships in adolescence can lead to serious risk in adulthood, right? Or as people age. So folks can become, at higher risk for things like substance abuse, eating disorders, risky sexual behavior, further intimate partner violence. You tell me, why do you think that folks who've experienced teen dating violence, why do you think that they are at higher risk for eating disorders? Why do you think? Type in the chat. Why do you think that they are at higher risk for eating disorders? Yeah, everyone's popping in. Great way to establish some control, right? And we do know that eating disorders have a very high element of control, right? And yeah, and other folks are saying regain power and control some element of their lives. Yeah, and so think about that, right? And so think about the lack of control that teens and young folks have within their lives, and then think about how abuse and things that happen when they're young could really exacerbate some of these things. Thank you all for chiming in. So we talk about the second dot point here. Sexual or physical abuse makes teen girls 6 times more likely to become pregnant and twice as likely to get STIs, right? So think about forced sexual interactions, things not happening with consent. Maybe someone, is it called stealthing? Where folks will start having sex, maybe they're using condom, maybe they're using a protection, and then the person takes the condom or protection off and without the other person knowing, right? And so think about the lack of consent there. Think about obviously maybe risk of pregnancy, risk of STIs, right? And so, you know, this and this is, you know, serious stuff that folks are going through, and they may not have the resources or understanding to be able to counter that or understand what is happening, right? And of course, at the bottom, you know, we know that abuse and violence, you know, does have a link to suicide ideation and increased suicide attempts, right? Especially with sexual violence. So let's talk about how technology plays into this, right? So I want to just start this off, y'all, with technology is not necessarily the problem. It's how folks use technology. That's the problem, okay? So no one throw your phone away after this presentation. No one throw your phone against the wall. That technology is not necessarily the problem. It's how folks use technology that is the problem. Think about how many times you use your phone through the day, how incredibly beneficial it is, your computer. I mean, most of us are working from home right now, right? Is that if I didn't have technology, if I didn't have my phone, if I didn't have my computer, I would not have a job right now, right? So there's so many great things about technology, and also these great things and the great apps and, you know, products can also be used to gain power and control over each other, right? So let's see. So for the Sharp survey, this is the one, the box on the right. So this was the question of use a social media app like Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook, right? And so the majority of students are using that, right? In many age groups, almost all of them are using it, right? So we know that it's happening, right? And so how can we as parents, caregivers, and mentors, how can we better educate ourselves in these social media platforms, these apps, to identify and support youth who are using them, right? And how to help them better use them. So here are a bunch of different ways that technology can be used to facilitate abuse, okay? So constantly texting the victim. I mean, we've given a couple examples of that throughout this presentation. So think about, you know, someone being checked up on 30 times an hour, right? 30 times an hour, okay? When I do these presentations in person, I generally have a coworker text me just as fast as they can throughout this presentation, and I, you know, turn my sound on. And I mean, I've done, you know, presentations hundreds of times, and even me, who has done the presentation so many times and literally can do it, you know, in my sleep, that those constant texts are still throwing me off. It makes it hard, right? And usually, you know, within 5 or 10 seconds, I'm like, okay, we got it, right? I couldn't even last a minute because it is so distracting, because it is so scary. I mean, think about maybe you're a teen and a dating partner, you know, texts you and you don't answer back. And then all of a sudden you get another text and then another one. And then you're getting more and more texts. They're coming quicker. And then you get a call, right? And then you get another call. And then they continue to just call and call and call until you pick up. Like, think about how incredibly scary that can be. How, you know, that by you not answering, by you being busy, and the increase in those communications, you know something bad is going to happen, right? So think about how that can affect students. You have kids in school who are distracted, who are on their phones, who are having a hard time staying even prepared or awake, right? Well, what's happening in their personal lives? You know, is their phone buzzing in their pocket and it's making them anxious because they know if they don't answer it, that their dating partner is going to yell at them, or their dating partner has pictures of them, intimate pictures of them, right, that they've threatened to share. So, you know, think of all the things that could be happening with our youth, and all the things that we're missing, right? If there's a student who isn't paying attention or is falling asleep in class, instead of you know, punishing that student, what is happening in that student's life to where they cannot get adequate sleep at home, right? What is happening in that student's life that they cannot pay attention, that they're having a hard time paying attention? What is happening to them? What has happened to them, not what is wrong with them, right? Remember that us as, educators, caregivers, parents, mentors, is that we may see just a snapshot of these kids' lives. We may only see them for a couple hours a day or see them through a screen, during virtual school, that we don't know all the things that have happened to them and all the things that are happening to them, right? And so responding in a trauma-informed way, asking what has happened to them rather than what is wrong with them, right? Kids are constantly told by peers, friends, family, what is wrong with them. Like, why can't you just put your dish in the sink? Why can't you just this? Is we need to change that. We need to change that, right? We need to meet these kids where they are. We need to support these kids instead of telling them what's wrong with them, asking how we can support them, right? Right. Yeah, I mean, we talked about looking through folks' phones, sending unwanted pictures and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of the term dick pic, right? I mean, these, lewd photos, explicit photos, videos, things like that. Um, you know, our kids are getting these pictures, our kids are sharing these pictures, and if they don't, understand why this is a problem, or if they don't feel comfortable because their partner is demanding these or threatening them, that's when we can step in, right? And unfortunately, many kids and youth don't know that sharing intimate images of yourself with other people and people having those images and videos on their phone, that's considered child pornography. And unfortunately, we have seen folks being charged with having child pornography when they have, pictures of a similarly aged um, school friend or something on their phone. And so how can we have these conversations with our kids, with, youth, talking about, hey, there's going to be times when people ask you to send pictures of yourself that you may not feel comfortable with. Let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about how you feel about that. Let's talk about how you say no, right? That sounds almost like some safety planning, y'all. Sounds like a little safety planning, right? Yeah, so I mean, Facebook, social media, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, all these different things, right? Think about how folks can post pictures, they can tag people in insulting memes or insulting videos or pictures, or in violent or aggressive or videos or pictures of sexual violence or sexual assault, right? That is affecting folks, right? Think about just on your own social media. This is homework. I want you to go to your own social media today, and I want you to find patterns in behavior, patterns in posting. I want you to identify all the ways that someone could find out where you'll be, know the gym that you go to, know the betos that you frequent, and that you get your bean and cheese burritos from, a couple times a week. I want you to find out, to look over your own social media and what can you find out about yourself from the things that you're posting, right? And then, have those conversations with youth, like, let's talk about maybe safer ways to use Facebook. Let's talk about safer ways to use Instagram, right? And let's weigh the pros and cons, right? What happens if someone asks you to do this? How can we say no? Or how can we, pass on this information, right? Let's see. Yep, we talked about that. Let's see. So, I mean, yeah, cell phones and internet can absolutely heighten the magnitude and danger, and even the subtleness of teen dating violence, right? Because it is instantly connecting us. So remember, the internet, social media, all these different things, we have used very similar things throughout history to connect with other people. And now we just have it digital, and now it's just instant, right? So think about, you know, back in the 80s when you were posting, you know, ads to like personal ads or, you know, other ads in different papers of like, hey, I'm looking for a Dungeons and Dragons group, right? Contact me, let's play, right? Now we just post all that online, right? Now we just get onto a social media and we say, hey, we're looking for a Dungeons and Dragons group, and we find it within, you know, 20 minutes, right? But all these things have been done throughout history. It's just now it is instant, right? So now there's less of a time delay, okay? So, you know, think about these ever-changing ways that folks are connecting to each other, right? So yeah, I mean, the term cyber stalking, many of you have heard this term, but using technology to abuse is a better term, you know, quite frankly, right? Because there's a number of different ways that we can utilize technology to abuse, to gain power and control other folks. It's not just stalking, right? And even how we've normalized stalking, we talked about this a little bit before, but think about how, you know, maybe you meet someone, or, you know, you go to your favorite coffee shop, and you know, the cute barista that you've been seeing for the past, you know, couple months, you saw them outside on their break without a mask on, and you're like, dang, feeling it, right? Here for it. And so you find them on social media and you're like, oh my gosh, I was Facebook stalking the cute barista from da 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 da. And, you know, you kind of like joke about it, like, oh, I just, you know, but why are we normalizing that? Why are we normalizing, you know, looking at someone's private information and for our own gain, you know, as something that's okay, right? Let's see if we've talked about, yeah, so here's just some numbers on what we specifically just talked about, right? So, I mean, folks are literally experiencing power and control technology facilitated abuse on a daily basis, and we just may not know about it, and we just may not be able to identify it. So technology can be hard, y'all. Technology is hard. Even when I get a new iPhone, like I just happen to just pick out an iPhone after I stopped buying what, Palms. Remember Palm Pilots? Those were the those were the days. And so because all my stuff is on that platform, I just continue with it, right? But even though, you know, if I get a new phone, it's literally the same thing. There's like two changes. I still struggle to send text after I get a new phone, right? And I'm one of those heckin' millennials, right? So, I mean, technology has a language of its own. It's in many ways has a, a significant learning curve and can be difficult to understand. And so it's important for us, especially as educators, parents, guardians, and mentors, to meet technology, right? Instead of shy away from it, is okay, this is something I don't understand. This is something that maybe potentially scares me. How can I learn more about it to not only keep myself more safe, to increase my safety and security, but also for the youth and the folks around me, right? And especially as service providers. So yeah, this is, I talked about this number a couple minutes ago, but 11% of teens reported being text checked on by their partners 30 times an hour. 30 times an hour. That is a text every 2 minutes, right? Um, you know, even during this webinar, looking at my phone, you know, getting all these texts from coworkers for the projects that we're working on and friends, you know, that's only in an hour and it's only, you know, 5 or 6 texts, but even that, you know, you're looking at your phone like, oh, I wonder what that person needs, or I wonder what they want, right? Imagine getting checked on 30 times an hour. And it's not just, hey, I finished that project. It's, what are you doing? Send me a picture of where you're at right now. Are you in class? You know, Steven says he can't see you. Where are you sitting? You know? So this second dot point, 16% claim that their partner has actually bought a cell phone or minutes for them, right? So that right there is a big red flag. If partner, ex-partner, partner with abusive behavior is buying you a cell phone, a laptop, smart home devices, all these different things, and especially if they're setting it up for you, that absolutely is definitely goes into red flag territory, right? Um, and oftentimes folks with abusive behavior rely on the victim or the survivor's lack of technology education or understanding to gain power and control over those folks, right? So legal actions. So in Utah, we have a number of different protective orders, and we do, it's kind of hard too, because some of the protective orders don't necessarily cover those who are experiencing the violence. So for example, dating violence protective orders, you have to be 18 years or older. And then that doesn't include a lot of the folks that are experiencing it who are under 18, right? And one of the issues too is that with some of these protective orders is, especially this one, let me get, there we go. So some of the protective orders, especially on the dating violence protective order, is that you cannot order the respondent, so the person who is perpetrating the violence, you cannot order them to stay away from a school or a workplace that the victim and the person who is perpetrated both work at or go to school at, and that's generally where most of the violence is taking place. So there are some protections, however, many of them don't include much of the demographic that is experiencing that. There are other protective orders that folks can get, for example, like a child protective order, that someone can get a protective order on behalf of a child. And so that could be potentially an option. However, in many areas, and especially during COVID, that there are significantly more barriers for folks to get, excuse me, let's get back to there, for folks to get protective orders, because there may not be as much access to the courts. And so the Utah courts do have online filing options, and depending on your the area that you live in, you can potentially file via email. So many of the courts in Utah have kind of caught up to the pandemic and really countered some of these barriers that folks are facing when trying to, get some protection, right? Some legal protection from someone. However, there's still some pretty significant barriers to that. So my advice, my best practice would be to go connect with an advocate, especially a legal advocate, at your local domestic violence service provider, especially for those out of state, because there could be many different resources that we might not know, we might not be aware that are available, right? And so you can apply for protective orders, on your own, within Utah, civil protective orders. However, connecting with an advocate, connecting with system advocates are really great to connect with when working on protective orders, because they work within the system and that's literally what they do. So working with an expert, someone who knows about protective orders, is going to be the most, I guess, productive. I don't know if I want to use that term. Um, but connecting with your local resources is going to be the best option, right? Even folks who work within the field, that these protective orders change so often, that we may not even be aware, sometimes, of some of the changes, right? And so connecting with professionals is absolutely the best option. So, can teen dating violence be prevented? Yeah, much of teen dating violence can be prevented, right? There's a lot of things that we can prevent, right? And unfortunately, prevention programs oftentimes don't get funded, right? It's hard to, in many ways, quantify, prevention programs. Is how can we show prevention programs are working, right? Well, if we have less reports, or less services utilized, stuff like that. But especially in eras of more information and access to the internet and resources, that we're actually seeing more people report, and more people connecting with resources. So that can be difficult, and it oftentimes is hard to on paper show the effectiveness of prevention programs, right? Even though we know that prevention programs are effective, right? When we're stopping the violence before it happens, when we're stopping the harm before it happens, then we're not dealing with the aftermath. We're not paying for, care. We're not, seeing how trauma affects people through their life course. When we talk about ACEs, right? Adverse childhood experiences, where when we're preventing, violence and ACEs, is we're not, seeing these organic diseases, as much. Folks are, living different lives. They're connecting and getting resources, and, even care, right? So here's a couple prevention programs. In the resource section that we're going to go over in just a second, there's a couple websites that you can go to that have a bunch of programs. But a couple states have utilized some dating violence and sexual assault prevention programs that have been beneficial, right? So we have, places like Detroit and Long Island who have had either 12-session dating violence curriculum, or 5-session. So one of the issues too, with dating violence curriculum, is that it can't just be a one-time thing, right? It can't just be someone comes into a classroom for 1 hour a semester and talk to kids. It has to be an ongoing thing. It has to be an ongoing conversation, right? Because there's so much to know about teen dating violence, and about the nuances in these relationships, right? Okay, let's see. Is it possible to go over what needs to be reported for mandated reporters regarding teen dating violence and non-consensual? Yes. Okay, that's actually a really good question. So in Utah, everyone who is 18 years or older is a mandatory reporter. So you have to report suspected or known child abuse. So if, I wonder, I do have a copy of the Utah consent laws. And we do have, next month, we're having a 40-hour training, and we are having someone from DCFS to come and talk to us about this as well. So I can send that information out to y'all as well, and you're welcome to attend that session. So basically, if someone is experiencing sexual violence, abuse, and they're under the age of 18, call DCFS, report it, right? So it's not our job to determine if it constitutes as abuse, if it meets the standards, if it meets the statute's requirements for defined abuse. Our jobs in the state of Utah for 18 years or older is to report suspected or known child abuse. So better safe than sorry. I will send you the information for the consent laws in Utah, but they do get tricky. So basically, if you don't know, if you suspect, if you think that there is abuse, sexual violence, intimate partner violence happening, make a call to DCFS. There are very specific laws depending on the age of youth and age of kids that law enforcement have to investigate, and there are also specific ages and interactions that DCFS have to investigate. So my advice, best practice, especially within Utah with our mandatory reporting laws, is to make a call to DCFS, and they will tell you if this is something that they can look into. They will tell you if it is something they can't look into, but they will give you that information. They can break down the specific statutes for you. So it's really quite difficult because different ages within Utah can do certain things sexually according to the statute. And even if there's a 1 age or 1 year age difference, that if one person is in a different age category of things that they can and can't do sexually and the other person is not, then that could potentially be considered child abuse. So even if it's consensual, because of the way that the statute is set up, that you would still have to make reports to DCFS. So DCFS is a really great resource. They connect folks and victims to services. And so they have even a lot of resources and services available for folks. But yeah, you definitely want to call and make that connection with DCFS. Hopefully that answered your question. I know that's kind of a broad answer, but the statute is pretty specific and it gets really complicated. And that's what DCFS job is to do, is to investigate those and handle those situations. So yeah, that's a really common question. And I definitely invite you to come to the DCFS presentation next month, but that's basically it, is called DCFS. That's what they do. So I'm going to send y'all the consent laws too, just so you can look at that, have a little gander, and then I will send you more information on DCFS as well. So safe dates, this is the one that's used mostly in Utah. And if you've ever interacted with an organization that has used safe dates, most of them do update it. It is dated, and so it's very heteronormative, and so it doesn't include queer and trans folks. And so programs and organizations that do have funding for healthy relationships curriculum generally take safe dates and revamp it and create a more inclusive curriculum, right? So 4th R, I haven't actually seen 4th R being used. The one that we use mostly in Utah so far has been safe dates. And then there's other organizations that have created their own healthy relationships curriculum. But some of them, they don't have the best outcomes. So if we talk statistically speaking, something can be statistically significant. So via the numbers, it's significant. There was a significant effect in this treatment, right? But it may not be meaningful, okay? So that's kind of one of the downsides to some of these programs is they may have statistical significance, but they may not be meaningful. So they may not make a big reduction in dating violence, or they may not make a big change. So there's a lot of programs that do show promise and you know, help with psychoeducational learning. However, some of them may not be as effective in specific outcomes that folks are looking for. So let's talk more about the resources and organizations that have a number of different guides and toolkits available. Wow, it has been a minute since I've done a webinar because I forgot that we have this game to play. So why don't we play this before we get to the resource section? All right, so from this little sliver of picture, do you think that this is a picture of one of my cats, or do you think this is a picture of a raccoon? What do you think? Type into chat. Is a picture of a raccoon, not a rat, or my cat? We definitely have folks who have played this game before. Ooh, someone said feline. Whoa, someone is classing it up here. I don't think anyone has ever said feline. It looks like everyone is popping in with, oh, we have someone who's saying raccoon now. Okay. So let's see what it is. So it is a quality picture of my cats, it looks like there. It looks like Totoko is not having the best day there, but okay, let's answer this question too before we get into resources. So this has been a challenging time for us. You know, this 2020, we have been promised hovering cars. We've been promised, you know, what is it? Teleporting, all these different things. And what we have is a pandemic and increase in, you know, depression and anxiety within our populations. So how have you been taking care of yourself this year? How have you been taking care of yourself recently? What have you done this week to take care of yourself? How have you practiced self-compassion this week? What are you doing to take care of yourself? Type that into chat. Ooh, camping, hiking, paddleboarding, rock climbing with friends. Nice. Over this year, I've been doing a lot of hiking. Ooh, walking and shopping at Walmart. See, shopping can be really great, especially when there's not a lot of people around, and you can kind of be chill and you don't have to worry so much, and to be in and out so quickly. Ooh, bubble baths. Nice. Having to work from home. I get the blessing of having lunch with my family every day. Oh, that's very cool. Yeah. I mean, I love the fact that when I'm doing presentations or doing, you know, grant documentation, that I can take a 5-minute break, go cuddle the cats, come back and be great. Ooh, voted. That's what I'm talking about. I have my mail-in ballot right here. Just need to go drop it off. I love that. Yes, deleted Facebook from my phone. You know what? Probably in every one of these trainings, someone says that. Someone says deleted social media from my phone. I did that with Instagram a couple months ago, and it's been great. Yeah, I've been doing some online shopping. It's maybe been a little bit of a problem at this point. Thank you, everyone. That's great. That's great. So yeah, remember that domestic violence service providers, even though we are, you know, living in a pandemic, that they still are open. They still have services. They may look different, but services are still available. So there is a lot of telehealth happening right now, and domestic violence service providers are still putting confidentiality first. So confidentiality will always be number one in a domestic violence service provider, okay? So here are some of the specific teen dating violence resources. So Love is Respect. If you have not looked into Love is Respect, if you don't know about Love is Respect, log on after this. So they are great. They have a lot of really good information on their website. They have a text line. They have a call-in number, which the image seems to be blocking some of that. Let's see if I can. There we go. Oh, there we go. But yeah, so a lot of great information on teen dating violence and young folks who are experiencing dating relationships. Futures Without Violence, they do so many great things. They have a lot of really great pamphlets and information that you can order off their website. They work with violence against folks throughout their life course, so children and adults. And so they do have a lot of really great information too. And they have really good webinars. I really, really enjoy their webinars. So this one is one that has programs and prevention programs on their website. So definitely check them out because they have a lot of great information and resources online for these prevention programs, for these educational programs for youth aged 12 to 24. Okay, so break the cycle. Okay, NNEDV. So remember how we talked about technology abuse, right? Technology abuse is literally happening everywhere. Okay, this is not something that's specific to teens or young folks. This is literally happening in majority of intimate partner violence relationships. So National Network to End Domestic Violence has a wonderful, wonderful project called Safety Net that has a whole bunch of resources for technology facilitated abuse. They have toolkits, y'all. They have toolkits for victims. They have toolkits for service providers. So much good information on there. And they just came out with an app to help folks log and track evidence of victimization. So that's really excellent, so that folks can have all the evidence on their phone, locked up in this one app. So we have the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which we're gonna move that graphic a little bit. So this is, the National 24/7 hotline for domestic violence. So you can call this at any time and you will be linked to local resources. So if you are unsure about resources in your area, this is a great number to call because then they can link you to local resources. They do have a lot of great information on their website as well, and a lot of other great resources and links to other organizations. So now we have Strong Hearts Native Helpline. So Strong Hearts Native Helpline is an excellent resource. I really like their blog, their website. They have a really good articles on there. And also they have a helpline that is a culturally appropriate helpline for folks who are experiencing intimate partner violence, dating violence, right? So this helpline, 1-844-762-8483, is available every day from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. So if you haven't already checked it out, at least go to the website. This is an excellent resource that's out there. So then we have one of our sibling coalitions, the Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and they do a lot of great webinars. They just had they've been doing a bunch of webinars recently, and they even have a YouTube page just like we do. So you can check out all their past webinars as well. But they do the 24-hour sexual violence crisis line for the state of Utah. So 1-888-421-1100. And then our other sibling coalition would be RAW. So this is restoring ancestral winds. And so they don't work just in Utah. So remember that they're not bound by state lines. It's tribal lands, right? So they're in like the Southwest area, but they also have some resources and information on their website, and they do trainings as well. So, I mean, I'm a little bit biased because I'm like literally the training and outreach education coordinator. But the more training and more education that you have for your staff and yourself is just is better for serving victims and survivors, right? So here is our 24/7 domestic violence crisis line. So the Utah Domestic Violence Link Line, it is Utah's domestic violence crisis hotline. Many domestic violence service providers have crisis lines as well. So you can call this line and be connected to your local domestic violence service provider or sexual assault prevention program or sexual or rape crisis center. And anyone can call this number. So if you are experiencing intimate partner violence, if you are experiencing dating violence, if you are a friend or family member of someone who's experiencing a form of violence, if you're a service provider, if you're a therapist, you can call. There's a bunch of resources that they have, and it's not specifically just for folks who are experiencing violence. This is a resource hotline for everyone to call. So you can find us on social media. We have, Facebook, we have Twitter, we have our website, and then our YouTube. So our YouTube has webinars, our past webinars, other video uploads, stuff like that. So this is a great place to watch previous webinars. And you will notice that some webinars that we do will not be posted there, and that's generally due to us not owning the content, and in other times it's for safety reasons. So if it isn't up there, it's probably because of that. But if you are looking for a specific training or something, email me, which you can do here, and then I can link you to that or give you more information on upcoming trainings. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for participating and having this conversation. Hopefully you learned some stuff. I will be sending you some additional information after this, and hopefully this recording will be up on YouTube by tomorrow. Yeah, so thank you so much. I hope that you have an excellent day. You're excellent, and I really appreciate it. Go practice some self-care, y'all. Go have some lunch. I mean, tacos sound pretty good right now, but yeah, thank you everyone. Have an excellent day and week.